Hello and welcome to episode 80 of Only Human. Wow, that's amazing. 80 episodes. Sometimes quantity has a quality all its own. Today we're going to talk about untapped potential and specifically the role of complacency and what it plays in determining the arc of our lives. To put it bluntly, and the bottom line up front, complacency is the fulcrum of our success or failure. I mean, we live in a land of opportunity, but we also live in a time when a lot of things are given to us without a lot of effort. But if we don't realize complacency when it occurs in our lives, we might soon find out we're not going to get the life we wanted. It might be the one we deserve, but not the one we intended. It's not the one we dreamt about when we were younger and just getting started. So let's get going to see what we can do about all that. And I want to begin like we often do with this week in safety land. It's not a huge or well-known incident we're going to talk about here, but it's kind of important in how it fits into the topic of complacency. OSHA report just came out. I don't know whether it was a final report or an interim report about a Tesla factory worker up the road not too far from me who was injured at the Tesla gigawatt factory in Austin. I think this might have happened back in 2024. But the worker was seriously injured when a robotic arm malfunctioned unexpectedly during routine maintenance. And this guy suffered severe cuts and required hospitalization. When the OSHA boys got there and investigated, their preliminary reports indicated that they failed to follow lockout tagout procedures. Those of you that are in any industry like manufacturing or aviation or really pretty much any maintenance that deals with automation or powered equipment know that when you turn something out, you turn something off, you tag it. It's locked out and therefore tagged out, and you know it's safe to work on. It's kind of a hassle to do that all the time, especially if you're in a highly repetitive task, right? But it does ensure that the machinery you're about to work on is de-energized when you're working on it, and that's important. So OSHA discovered that it was likely that lockout tagout procedures were not followed, and this was likely due to several factors that included complacency. It's important to understand that when you already know that something is turned off, you don't have to verify it, right? And when in highly repetitive work, you tend to make some assumptions like that, right? Especially these steps are skipped by workers familiar with routine tasks, especially in high pressure environments, right? Like Tesla's factory. So this guy was reportedly performing maintenance on the arm, which was a repetitive task for him, and probably assumed the system was saved without fully verifying that it was de-energized. And when the robot arm came to life, he ended up getting hurt, but luckily he's recovered or recovering. Tesla has a history at that factory, apparently, of OSHA citations, and so that may suggest something broader in their culture, where routine operations may foster lax adherence to standards. But I chose this one today to talk about, not because there's anything really dramatic here, but we are going to talk about complacency and how vitally important it is. But I want to talk about it from a much more personal level. And this is as close as you're ever going to get to a tonykern manifesto about performance. And I call it, basically, this podcast is paired with a newsletter I just wrote on LinkedIn of the same name, and it's titled Untapped Potential, easy for me to say. Untapped potential is a crime against humanity. Who cares if I'm lazy? Or who cares if I'm complacent or apathetic? As long as I'm getting my job done, right? What's it to them, man? I do me, right? You do you. It turns out that there's a lot more to it than that, because what's behind the reasons for complacency in the modern era, there are much larger forces at work here. Forces that rely on us being apathetic and lethargic, and forces that continue to squeeze us. And when they squeeze one of us, by extension, they learn how to squeeze all of us for every drop they can get out of it. And they do this for a variety of reasons, but I'll just refer to it as organizational survival, right? Because our apathy and our laziness are their tools that help them survive. So I want to quickly review some of the powerful forces that we're facing. And as we do, I want you to know that it's important you remember that inside of each of these things that we're going to talk about, there's both good and bad, right? I want you to remember that all of these forces that I'm about to talk about, have to convince you they are good for you and working for you, not against you and not bad for you. So as I discuss this, remember, the tale of a wolf in sheep's clothing. So I've divided these into two categories, big baddies and little baddies. So let's go to the big baddies first, the ones that really grind us down and make us either lazy or distracted or apathetic and uncaring. And the first one's big government. This is not a political podcast, as you know. But not all aspects of our government are bad. In fact, without government, without the architecture, the structure, we'd likely descend into anarchy. But keep this in mind. The government can only survive through taking from the governed, you and I. They don't ask us for help. They compel it through taxation and a host of other fees. I have to buy hunting licenses and fishing licenses and put license plates on my car and get it inspected, right? Now, don't get me wrong. I've worked with some of the highest level people in our federal government. For many years, I worked with them. And in my experience, there are a lot of good people, but there's more than a few bad apples. Right? There are many bad apples. Some of them are rotten to the core, and they're in very senior positions. There are also a few good apples, but they pretty much keep their heads down. And in between the good apples that keep their heads down and the bad apples that tend to rise to the top because they're self-serving, and by being self-serving, they're also helping to take more and give less to you. And that's highly valued in many sectors of the federal government, at least. But there are a lot of other apples that are neither good nor bad. They're just apples, right? And they really do nothing of value for the common taxpayer, but they are of high value to the bad apples they work for, right? Because they support them, they prop them up. And our apathy pays for it all. As a result of this, we get a less effective government that feeds itself first. So the number one big baddie is the government that encourages us to just be quiet, pay our taxes, and not ask too many questions. Let's look at the next big baddie. I call it big healthcare. This is a conglomerate of hospitals, health insurers, medical researchers, and it's somewhat overseen and it's highly funded through Medicare and things like that by big government, another baddie. And they're supposed to have our best interests in mind. Modern medicine is amazing, but very expensive. In my own case, I guess it's 2.5 years ago now, I had a hip replacement, 100% covered by Medicare. And the surgeon did a great job. And the entire support system did a great job. and I am completely rehabilitated. In fact, I'm better than I was before I went in there because my leg was 1 inch longer. My left leg was 1 inch longer than my right leg, and now they're the same size. Pretty cool stuff. When I got my Medicare statement back, it showed the total cost of that thing was well over $500,000. And I was pretty shocked by that. And I was grateful that it was covered by my insurance, but it made me think long and hard about how and where that money came from and where it was going. So big healthcare, they don't just do miracle workers, stuff like they did for me. And maybe even in my ramp up to my hip replacement surgery, there was tests upon tests, right? We need to have another set of x-rays from this angle and that angle, and you're going to have to go to see a specialist first. And all of these things are recommended to determine what we need and then prescribed, right? Which ties us into our third big baddie, which is big pharma. These guys are the pill pushers, the syringe slingers, the ones who promise a cure for whatever ails us, real or imagined, right? They thrive on our willingness to pop pills rather than question why we're sick in the first place, right? And at least here in America, their commercials are everywhere. They're very slick. Their lobbying is even slicker, and their profits are obscene, right? I don't think that big pharma is here to make us healthy, right? They're here to keep us just healthy enough to keep buying. It's why, in my humble opinion, we haven't seen any true cures for things like diabetes and cancer, because those are huge moneymakers, right? And guess who's footing the bill for all of these executives' yachts and second, third, and fourth homes? We are, right? Through sky-high drug costs and insurance premiums, etc. So far we've covered big government, big healthcare, big pharma. You're saying, well, what about complacency, Tony? Hang on, we're getting there. The fourth big baddie is big food. And I think, Robert Kennedy Jr. is doing a good job of bringing some of this at least into the public eye. Have you ever wondered why your grocery cart is full of brightly colored boxes that taste like heaven, but leave us feeling like we just ate garbage? Big food engineers our snacks to be addictive, right? Not nutritious. Convenience is prioritized over purity, leading to overprocessed foods that we can pop in the microwave and 60 seconds later we're eating this stuff tastes really good and it's slowly killing us, right? These guys are the masterminds of things like you can't eat just one and the obesity epidemic that follows. And how do we now treat obesity? With Ozempic and a bunch of other ties in to big pharma, right? Big food will slap something like low fat or organic stamps on a label to make you feel good, virtuous, while you're chowing down chemical laden who knows what. And we keep munching because it's easier to throw something in the microwave than to cook something from scratch that's actual real food, right? So big food, another baddie that kind of pulls us away from being what we might be. The next one's big tech, right? And these guys are the puppet masters of pretty much everything, certainly our attention. They've got us scrolling and clicking and liking until our eyes glaze over and our brains turn to mush. Big tech doesn't just want your time. It seems like they want your soul, right? They want to get you on one side of an argument or another and keep us fighting and paying attention to everything but what's important to us, right? Their algorithms, I'm really having a hard time with 3-syllable words today. They're designed to keep us hooked, distracted, and docile, right? They take our information, they sell it to the highest bidder. They turn our youth into zombies. And they all refer to it simply as connectivity, right? You're connected, you're part of the group. And when we hand them all of our lives and our information on a silver platter, we need to recognize that it's us that's doing that, right? And when we think about unhooking, it becomes really hard, right? There's a lot of studies that show how difficult it is to turn off a screen for very long because, hey, I mean, that cat video was hilarious. It made us laugh for 30 seconds, right? All right, enough on big tech. Keep in mind, they're the puppet masters. The last big baddie before we get to some little baddies is big science. And I spell that science with an S with a $sign stroke through it. Don't get me wrong, science is great. I'm a scientist. Science is only great when it's actually science, when everything's questioned and it continues to evolve and it gets closer and closer to truth with a capital T, right? But big science is a business, right? And it's what happens when research is bought and paid for by the highest bidder. If you need to find a study that says sugar is health food, they'll find one, right? If you need to bury some inconvenient truths about climate change or health, they'll find a couple of PhDs to do some research on that. And then they wave their credentials around like magic wands, and we nod along because they claim that all of their research is peer-reviewed and published in a major journal, which are probably also bought and paid for. And we just get too lazy and too complacent to dig deeper and find out for ourselves. So those are the big baddies that are forces that are trying to keep us from achieving what we can, who we can become. But there's some little ones too. I call these small baddies. State and local governments. Some of them are very good. I live in a pretty nice place here. I got nothing really bad to say. But if big government is the dragon, state and local governments are the pesky goblins, right? That pick our pockets while we're distracted. They're the ones slapping us with user fees and community fees, and here's the big one, property taxes. In some states, they have personal property taxes. When I lived in Virginia, I had to pay tax on the car that I had bought and paid for years before every year just for the privilege of owning it, right? And that's the same thing here on my ranch here in Texas. I mean, I bought this place, and yet it cost me a lot in property taxes every year to continue to be able to own what I already hold the deed for or soon will, right? And so what's that all about, right? It's just like the federal government. They need more stuff from you because they can't produce it on their own. They need to build something, right? A shiny new stadium, a bullet train to nowhere, right? And it's something that they dream up. And simultaneously, as our roads crumble and our schools leak, we shrug it off because fighting City Hall sometimes feels like punching fog. Okay? So that's a small baddie. Here's the last baddie before we come back around to what this all leads to. And there are a lot of good places to work out there, but sometimes an uncaring employer can really, really take its toll on our psyche, right? Your boss isn't always the problem, but the system they're part of often is, right? The corporate machine, from small businesses up through the Amazons of the world, they want us to be productive, but not too ambitious, right? They want us to be loyal, but not too demanding, right? And a lot of times, and I remember this in the federal government, they'll dangle a raise or a promotion in front of you that's just out of your reach, man, knowing that you'll keep grinding away for it. Okay? And they count on us being too tired, too scared of being let go, or too apathetic to push back very hard. And most of us play along because, the bills don't pay themselves, and a job is a real thing to most of us. So what do all these baddies lead us to? They lead us to become feeling like we're such a small cog in so many big wheels, big government, big food, big pharma, big science, the little baddies, right? And I call this the complacency of meh. The goal of all the big baddies and some of the little baddies is to have us in a steady state of being distracted, dependent, and dumb. Sitting our lazy boys, binge watching some reality show or scrolling through our feeds. They want us fat, sick, broke, glued to our screens because that's when we're easiest to control. And when we keep feeding them the resources they need to grow. I don't want to say they're evil villains, twirling their mustaches in a secret lair. They're businessmen for the most part, even inside government, and they're just exploiting our willingness to check out and keep feeding the system. But here's the deal. We're not victims here. And it sounds like we are, right? Like, oh, look at all these big bad things, big baddies, little baddies are doing to me. We are willing participants, right? Every single time we choose convenience over curiosity or comfort over courage, we hand them the keys to our potential, right? They're not forcing us to eat junk, buy pills, or doom scroll away the night. We do that to ourselves. So how do we break this spell? These guys are really good at getting us all to do it. And myself included. I mean, I'm not trying to be holier than thou here. I feel all of these things, man. I throw in microwave meals more than I should. And I spend way too much time on my phone, right? So what's the antidote? How do we break this spell for this, what do I want to call it? Apathy-fueled dystopia, right? I mean, it's not storming Facebook headquarters, right? Or burning down the government system. As tempting as that sounds. It's simpler, but it's harder, right? We need to wake up. And we need to start small, right? Buy a real steak or some real meat or real something from the outside of the store. Take the time to cook it, right? Read a book that's challenging for you, old-time book, right? One with pages, ink, paper. Get engaged with your government and ask why your tax dollars are funding some shiny new boondoggle instead of fixing the streets. Say no to the next pointless test, vaccine, or pill. Look for second opinions. There's a lot of good information online now, a lot of bad too, right? I'm not telling you to ignore your doctor, but you need to be aware that a lot of them get kickbacks for you taking a particular drug or a particular vaccine. Right? Turn off your phone for an hour or two and find a real person to talk to face. You see, to wrap this all up, untapped potential is a crime against humanity because it's a crime against you and me and everyone living in this world today. Every time that we allow, and that's what we're doing, we're allowing it, any one of these big baddies or little baddies to lull us into complacency, we rob ourselves of the life that we could have. We are not just a cog in their machine. We're their fuel, right? They can't live without us. So if we stop feeding them, if we get up, if we get curious, if we get angry, your potential is a weapon. So let's wield it that way. So that's pretty much my rant on why so many of us don't reach our potential. But I'll be damned as I sit here in the autumn of my life if I'm going to continue to allow things that are within my control appear to be out of my control. And if that means I have to readjust my schedule, if I have to do a little bit more shopping for good food, if I have to ask a few more questions when I go to the doctor and do a little more research on my own, if I have to attend a school board meeting, or write a letter to my congressman or senator and ask for some feedback, right? It's one thing to write a letter and say, I support this, but it's another to say, tell me why I should support this. And they usually have staffs that'll get back to you. And that's how you can tell the good ones from the bad ones. So all of this here on episode 80 felt like a good time to pull a few things together, as we're going to continue next week and the week after with more special guests to talk about some of these things. We're going to continue on the path of leadership. We're going to talk a little bit about harassment and bullying and those types of things that can also hold us down in a much more active and an unlawful manner, as well as a few surprises that we've got coming up. So between now and then, please keep getting better where you are with the resources at hand. And like always, we will see you soon.